Hello, and welcome to tonight's webinar. We will be discussing interventions um, for people who are having suicidal thinking. It's been a tough day today. My Aunt Kimbo, see, not everybody has an Aunt Kimbo. I had an Aunt Kimbo, passed away this morning, and so been praying for her and praying for her family, and so I'd like to dedicate this to her. My Aunt Kimbo was an amazing lady. She was an amazing nurse. She kicked butt. She took names, and she was a great aunt to me. Very helpful for me when I was a young kid and didn't have much growing. Didn't have many opportunities to do fun things. She would take me to do fun things with me and my cousin Carrie. Um, Also thinking about my brother Jacob. His birthday would have been May 15th. And he committed suicide approximately 3 years ago. And so just some things on my mind today. But with that being said, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and people need to know information. So that's why I'm here. And so with that being said, when we talk about intervention for suicidal thinking, and maybe I'm just a little bit biased because of my profession, but I think it starts with therapy. I think the work that a psychologist can do is key in helping an individual overcome these thoughts. Now, occasionally I will hear people say, well, Josh, I went to a therapist and it didn't help. And one of the important things to remember is there are all different types of therapists. There are all different kinds of therapists. And so just because one therapist was not helpful does not mean that therapy as a whole is not helpful. Research says that if for suicidal thinking, the best intervention is therapy plus medication. So when we're choosing whom to go see for therapy, that's a big choice. The number one factor of all when looking at success in therapy is whether or not you feel comfortable with your therapist. Of all the things that it could be that could help someone feel do well in therapy, it's whether or not they feel comfortable with the therapist. Which is why I decorate my office in Star Wars and superhero decor, because who wouldn't feel comfortable in Star Wars and superhero decor? So you want to make sure that you find someone that you're comfortable with and that you feel is going to respect you and your values. So one of the easiest ways to go about this is talk to other people who have gone to therapy and try to figure out who did they see, did they like them, what was their experience, because getting a referral from someone else is a great way to know whether that is helpful or not. Trying to just get a name off the internet is tough. Now, the people who I know will often ask me for referrals, and I can do that, especially in this area because I know the psychologist. Depending on whether you're a member of a religion, some religious groups, I know Mormons have the list of Mormon therapists, and other religions have group lists of Catholics or Jewish therapists because they might feel more comfortable with someone of their same religion. It was interesting when I was at Jewish Family Services, everybody just thought I was Jewish. I don't know. I mean, my name is Joshua, but I did have to let them know that I wasn't Jewish, just so that we were all on the same page here. There is amongst Mormon populations, if you want to see a Mormon psychologist here in Indiana, it's hard to come by. I am the only Mormon psychologist south of Indianapolis. And there aren't any Mormon psychologists in Louisville, so I don't know where you get to the next Mormon psychologist, but you have to travel a ways if you want to see a Mormon psychologist. There are some Mormon master's level therapists, and there are, and it also complicates matters because not every, some people I can't see for therapy because I know them too well. Now, let's say you don't know someone to get a referral from. Well, one of the things that you'll want to know is what kind of therapy they practice. Now, there are different types of therapy, and amongst psychologists, we take this pretty seriously. So my type of therapy that I practice is cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, it's just so much fun. And it involves looking at an individual's thinking patterns and analyzing their thoughts and determining whether their thoughts are accurate or inaccurate, and then correcting their thinking processes. And then adjusting their behavior as necessary with reinforcers and punishment. And so this is, in my opinion, the most objective, straight line way of looking at therapy. But there are a lot of different others classes of conducting therapy. Another strategy that I will use from time to time, depending on the functioning level of the individual, is I will go into narrative therapy, which is a kind of fun way when you look at an individual's life as a narrative or a movie. And those who know me know that I can make movie comparisons with the best of them. And so you're trying to identify where they are at in life and help them overcome the climax or plot point of what they're going through, and viewing how they overcome the obstacle in their life. There are therapists who go more into a Freudian or psychodynamic approach. Now, if that's what you're looking for, then you should know what you're looking for. Freudian, they're going to look much more at underlying unconscious desires. So you meet a therapist, and if it's not going well, then you always have a right to go to try another one, or ask for a referral from that therapist. It's much better. See, many times people think that the therapist is going to be offended if therapy doesn't continue. We're not. We just want the people to get better. So if you're not feeling comfortable with us, that's fine. We want you to feel comfortable with a therapist. I remember there was this young lady that I was seeing for therapy, and nothing. I couldn't get her to hardly talk at all. I could get her to draw, and we talk a little bit about that. But other than that, I wasn't getting anything from her. And so I talked to her about it. I talked to her dad. We referred her to a female therapist. Did great. Just felt more comfortable talking with a female therapist. That doesn't bother me. This is an area where the person should be able to have therapy with the person that they would like to see and who they feel most comfortable with. One of the things that makes treating suicidal thinking tough is because it can come from a lot of different sources. And one of those sources can be trauma. And so if it is trauma, there are therapists who are specially adept at dealing with trauma issues. And that is a very specialized training, and therapists can definitely mess it up when it's not done correctly. So it is, if trauma is a part of what we're looking at, then you want to make sure that the therapist is comfortable in trauma and has experience in working with individuals who have experienced all the various different kinds of trauma that there are, unfortunately, to experience in this world. Sometimes the issues come out of attachment, and so never feeling secure with your primary caregivers, and so the it is important in if we're concerned about attachment, that you find a therapist who specializes in attachment. One of the things that you'll see, especially in areas of the country where there's lots of psychologists. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. There's a lot of psychologists in Louisville, Kentucky. And so we have to have a specialty. And so my specialty is autism and developmental disorders. And so when amongst my colleagues, when they have somebody who is a significant autism case, they will contact me because I'm the autism guy. And so depending on the issue that you're looking at, you may want to look at for somebody who's an expert in that area. Now let's talk about cognitive strategies with suicidal individuals, because this is my favorite framework to look at. People who are having suicidal thoughts aren't thinking well. I know. Isn't that just, I bet you had never considered that. And they make cognitive errors in a lot of different ways. So one of the first kind of errors that they make is what we call all or nothing thinking, which means everything is great or everything is horrible. I am a wonderful person or I suck. This is a wonderful job or this job is horrible. There is no in between. Now, this line of thinking is not helpful because we live in a world that's a lot of gray. And so there are very few things in this world that are absolutely perfect in every way, other than Empire Strikes Back. But that's probably the only thing. And there are very few things that are horrible in every possible way, other than Nickelback. And but a lot of things have good components to them, bad components to them. There is no one perfect, one horrible. And so one of the things that makes it hard for individuals who are suicidal is to receive negative feedback. Now, receiving negative feedback is something that we all have to do in this life. Sometimes we have to be told, you know what, you messed that one up. Sometimes the most successful people in this world can receive a negative feedback and be okay with it. And so if we can't receive negative feedback, then we can't grow and improve. So now, just stop a moment for clarification. Right now, my computer is being weird, and I cannot see any comments that people have posted. And so if I'm not responding to your comments, I still do like you as a person, and I value your input. But right now, it's just not showing them to me. So if it does show me, I'll start responding to those comments. If not, I'll just have to catch you after this is over, and hopefully they show up. Okay. So when we're dealing with all or nothing thinking, we're trying to analyze those cognitions to determine their accuracy. So you will hear, as is taught to us by Brother Kenobi, only a Sith speaks in absolutes. So people will say things like, everyone hates me. everyone doesn't hate you. There's somebody who likes you. There's probably multiple people that like you. Uh, I've never had a good day. You've never had a good day? I don't know if I buy that one there. And so the therapist will challenge these cognitive distortions uh, because there are other ways of looking at things. Um, Black or white thinking, all good, all bad. One of the things that happens with people who are having black or white thinking is they think that if they make any mistake at all, then that makes them a horrible person in every way. And that is just not the case. And some people can be so hard on themselves. It was so sad. It's so sad. I had therapy once with a lady who was, in her mid 50s, and she said, "Dr. Josh, um, I think I'm going to hell." I'm like, "That's horrible. Now, why do you think that?" And she said, "I saw a PG-13 movie." And I was like, I think you can still make it to heaven. And so it is challenging these notions of people either being too hard on themselves, too easy on themselves, too hard on others, or just looking at things in just these contrasts with nothing in the middle is right where I hit people hard and hard again, confronting the way they're looking at things. One of the biggest cognitive distortions, and let's just say what they are: lies, delusions, things we tell ourselves, that a suicidal person will think is the world would be better off without me. And they legitimately believe that if the world would be better off if they were not in it, that they are somehow doing the world a favor by hurting themselves. And that's just a sad place to be. And helping them understand the difference that they make can be the biggest help to them. You'll hear things like, "I don't help anybody. I wish I was never born. I don't matter to anyone." And you want to show them how they've helped people and how they make a difference. Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life did a great job in this area, showing showing the main character how he had made such a difference in his small town. So, as a therapist, I'm challenging a lot of these cognitive structures. But as a person who's just talking, as a friend, you can do some of this too. Somebody says, "I don't have any friends." That's not true. You have me. And they'll say, "You're not my friend." I'm like, well, yes, I am. Because you can see what they want to do is they want to try to control what they think and what you think. That's not fair. They can definitely control what they think. They can't change what you think. So they can say, "I don't love anybody." I can't force them to change their mind on that. But they can't say that I don't love them, because I absolutely have the choice to be able to tell them I love them. And if I love them, I love them, and they're going to have to just deal with it. Another Another cognitive distortion that they bring up from time to time is that they that everything is their fault. Now, guilt is a tough emotion. It's a tough emotion. You know, many times we feel guilt because if we didn't feel guilt, we wouldn't have control over the world. So let me explain. Something bad happens. Now, when we break it down logically, there is there is nothing that we could have done to stop it. However, sometimes we will feel guilt because then if we accept that there's nothing that we or anybody else could have done to stop it, then we have to accept that we can't control what happens in this world, and that is scary. And most people would rather feel guilt than scared. And that's where guilt comes from, unfortunately. I was talking to my cousin Brian about he was with my brother Jared the night before he committed suicide, and how he didn't see anything in Jared that would lead him to believe that Jared was going to commit suicide. And there's a very good reason for that, because Jared wasn't showing any signs of what he was going to do. He was very good about masking his emotions and what he intended to do. And so he knew exactly what he was doing, and he was purposely not showing any signs of what that he wanted to commit suicide, because he wanted to commit suicide. There are people that who are suicidal, that engage in what we call option elimination, which means that you present ideas to them, and they will, you'll say your idea, and then they'll say, no, no, yes, but I can't do that, no. And and they think that there are no options available for them, but in reality, there are a lot of options available to them. And so part of what you're doing is helping them identify those options. Okay, so sometimes as therapists, you will see therapists who will engage in what we call safety contracts. I'm not a big safety contract guy. I just don't think they're very effective. So this is basically where the therapist draws up a contract and says, you have to sign this contract that you won't commit suicide. It's kind of a strange thing to do, if you ask me, because I mean, what are they going to not do it because they signed a piece of paper with their therapist? The research says that this is not really that effective. What on the other hand is effective is safety plans. So you have a suicidal thought. It's starting to get worse. What is your safety plan? There's a great app available for free on iTunes and Android devices called My3. I love it. This allows you to program the 3 people that you would call if you were feeling suicidal. It also has pre-programmed the crisis numbers for the state that you live in, and a one press button to 911. I find this great. I have a My3 app with my 3 people, and they know who they are, so that I can contact them in case I need to. Safety plan means, okay, it recognizes that even when we're functioning at our best, it is quite likely that we're going to have suicidal thoughts again. And so so if that does come to pass, what are we going to do about it? And So safety plans can be cuddle with my dog, uh, watch Star Wars. It can be take a hot shower. It can be anything you want it to be. Now, for cutting, like one of the best things that you can do for cutting is to keep your hands busy. Because if your hands are busy, you're not cutting. So when I was at Providence House, I ran a knitting and crochet group with the girls, and we just all crocheted together. Now, I wasn't very good, actually. I had to bring in somebody else to really teach the girls how to crochet because I wasn't good at it. But I sat with them and we crocheted, because when they were crocheting, they weren't cutting themselves. Which gets us to one of the next big interventions to help suicidal people. And now this one may seem a little bit silly, but it does work. It's called response prevention. Response prevention is exactly what it sounds like, making sure that they do not have the ability to do what they want to do. So, for example, if my kids have been having problems eating cookies, then what I'm going to do is I am going to load those cookies into the Brussels sprouts box and put them in the freezer. And then they have no access. They have no access to cookies. They don't know where they are. They can't get them. Some of the things we do when helping suicidal individuals from completing suicide is limiting the possibility that they will do it. Now you'll say, well, Josh, there's 100 different things they can do. Yes, there are 100 different things that they can do. But let's also think through this. Many times they're depressed. They don't have a lot of energy. We want to take away anything easy, because sometimes, and you might think I'm not being serious, but I'm being absolutely serious. Sometimes there are people who are so depressed and so suicidal, but they're too depressed to do anything about acting out on that suicidal thinking. So we want to take away, as much as we can, the preferred methods and the most available opportunities. So, am I going to lock away sharp knives if I have a suicidal person in my house? Yes, I am going to lock away sharp knives. Do I know that they could still cut with da-da-da-da-da? Yes, I do know that. But I'm not going to make it easy for them either. We do this all the time as parents. We know that kids can get around us on a lot of different ways, but we're not going to make it easy for them to break the rules either. You know, when it comes to firearms, it's a constitutional right, and I definitely believe that people should have their right to have their guns, but we have to be honest about what they are, and the fact that the 7th leading cause of death in this country is suicide with a handgun. One of the things that's important to understand, first, women attempt suicide twice as much as men, but men complete suicide twice as much as women. And why is that? Because men tend to choose the more violent methods that work. Unfortunately, we choose, in general, shooting, hanging, and jumping. Those methods work. The problem with firearms, when it comes to a suicidal individual, is it takes so little effort to act out on what you want to do. So it can be a very spontaneous decision. My brother Jacob's suicide was not well planned. It was very spontaneous. It was the result of an argument. And so I don't think he would have really followed through if he hadn't had a gun right there next to him. Gun safes are not a bad idea. Trigger locks are not a bad idea. Storing guns and ammo separately away from each other is not a bad idea. Having an intelligent conversation about mentally ill people and access to firearms is not a bad idea. Now, you can put a bunch of comments on here if you want to. That's fine. But I think saying that we need to have an intelligent conversation about mentally ill people and guns is not a controversial opinion. But who knows? Everything's a controversial opinion now, I guess. Now, there are some things about response prevention that you wouldn't even think. Do you know what the #1 is intervention in effectiveness for helping people not commit suicide by jumping off bridges? Putting netting under the bridge. I know. I bet you didn't see that one coming. But yes, they've done research studies on it. It's easy to do. They can put the netting out there enough where it would be very difficult for a person to jump far enough, and then they just fall into the net. They do this all the time in Canada. The #1 reason why it's not done in America, it's an eyesore. I think we can do better than that. So I think these are some areas to consider, and because if we can get the person to get help after an attempt, then maybe they get better. All right, so let's talk about medication for a minute. All right, sometimes people are feeling so bad that they need medicine, and when people are in that state, I will often refer them to one of my favorite psychiatrists to be evaluated for medication. The way they do medication now is so much better than the way they used to. They're making advances in this all the time that are great. One of the things that they have done that is helpful is they do gene site testing, where they go in and they take a little swab from your cheek, and then they can run testing to see what medications that you would respond best to. And okay, so this is getting very meta here, but I wanted to see your all's comments so that I can respond. And I got that to work. Oh, very good. I'll get to those in a minute. All right, so the gene site testing, they get your DNA, and they run the evaluation to see what medications you respond best to, and they run it across all different types of medications, antipsychotics, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, ADHD, the whole gamut, so you know, and then they give you a list of medications that you would respond best to, and they break it down into green, yellow, red. Green medicines are like a go. They would be great for you, limited side effects. Yellow means there would be some side effects, but they could be helpful. And red, meaning do not prescribe, no, bad. And this is very helpful. I wish they had this when my brother Jerry was going through therapy, because what he went through was they would put him on a medicine. He would try it for 6 weeks. He would come back. He said, it's not working. And they say, try 6 more weeks. And so he would try 6 more weeks. He'd come back. He'd say, like, it's still not working. And they would and then they would change and try a different medicine, and would go back and forth like this. He would years not being able to find the right medicine for him. And now it is so much more streamlined so we can find the right medicine for people. Okay, so I figured out, because they don't just pass out these doctorate degrees, you got to earn them, that I got my live video going on my phone. So now I can read your comments, because for whatever reason, it's not showing up in the computer. Ray, I know you had a very good therapist. Your therapist was not the best because you didn't see me. There can only be one best. If a therapist gets offended, he needs therapy. That's true. That's true, Liddy. So If anybody has any questions right now, I have the comments set up so you can put those on there and I can actually read them, which is helpful because I do want to be able to answer your questions. All right. So when it comes to medication, let's talk about the other big issue in the room and the one that I deal with a lot, and that is compliance to medication. Now, many times, the family will come in the room. I will ask this child, "Are you taking your medicine?" And they will say, "Yes, I'm taking my medicine." And I will press the kid on the issue, and the mom or dad will say, "Well, yeah, they're taking their medicine. I give it to them every day." And then I will say, "Well, you don't know." And actually, it is almost impossible to know if someone is actually taking their medication. At the prison, when a person is handed their medication, they are handed their medication in the presence of two officers and a prison nurse, people who are trained to identify if somebody is cheeking their medication. When we are concerned that the person may be cheeking their medication, we'll crush it up to make it harder to cheek. And they still cheek their medication. My father, up until the day before my brother died, gave my brother his medicine every morning and watched him, he thought, swallow it. Well, until later we found out that Jared was cheeking it and flushing it down the toilet. There is only one way to know if somebody is really, really taking their medication, and that is lab work. And that's only for certain medications where you can do that. So one of these medications is lithium. You can take every 3 months. They do this anyway, because interestingly enough, if you have too much lithium in your system, it can kill you. So they don't want you to get to that point. So they do regular lithium blood tests on you, and they know, one, if you have too much lithium in your system, two, if you've been taking your medicine, because if the lithium level is not there, then they know that you haven't been taking your medicine. And three, they can know whether or not you're at a therapeutic dose. So this is also the same place for Depakote. It is one of those medications that you can check through blood level. Other than that, you don't know. And I appreciate that you might have a close relationship with a person. And I think that's great. But the only way you really know for sure is if there's blood levels backing that up. Otherwise, you're going on faith. And faith is good and all, but one of the biggest things that we're doing in helping suicidal individuals is helping them make sure they take their medicine, because the medicine gives them the best possible chance to improve their situation. And so we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to ensure that they are properly taking their medicine. Okay. What should a person do when they have their mind set on committing suicide? Now that's a tough one, Max. When an individual is having their mind set on suicide, that there's limited things that we can do. Now, if we are talking to someone whose mind is set on suicide, they need to go to the hospital. And if they are unwilling to go to the hospital with on their own, then we need to go to the courthouse and get a mental inquest warrant, so they have to go to the hospital. If we are the person who wants to commit suicide and we are not committed to do that, then what we're hoping is that that person will reach out in any way to any person, and whether that be to a family member, that would be great, a therapist, a crisis line, but anybody um, to give them a chance so that they will not want to follow through on that. All right, so let me show you something. I don't know if you can see it here. Here you'll have the indentation from my wedding ring. I have gained a few more pounds since my wedding, and it was getting to the point where my wedding ring was turning my finger blue, and so I had to get this wedding ring off. And I saw this great YouTube video on how to get tight wedding rings off, and I used it with dental floss to get it off. And what you did is you threaded the dental floss through and tied it up, and voila. And the reason why that worked is because it broke the seal. See, when a ring is on your finger way too tight, it creates a seal. And as small as that break between the dental floss and the skin, that was enough to allow the ring to come off. We, as people who are helping out suicidal people, have to break the seal, where the seal is thinking that suicide is the only way to solve our problems, and we have to break that seal one way or another. And I have done a lot of different things to do that. All right, so, I feel in the mood to tell you one of my favorite stories. I feel pretty cool when I tell this story, so I got to make sure I'm really cool in my chair. All right, so this was when I used to work at the prison, and we had this guy in the prison psych unit. Now, prison psych unit, it's as scary as it sounds. And everybody's in separate cells, and there's these big doors, and they open up these latches, and that's where you pass the food through, and you talk through these little latches, and everything that they have is restricted. And so we had this inmate, and inmates are remarkably creative, figure out a way to get a razor blade, and he was going to cut himself. And so I was the head psychologist who was still there that day. I know, it's very scary. And so what I had to do was I had to go in front of the CERT team. Now, the CERT team comes in with all their big fancy equipment, taser shields and things like that, and they're going to get that razor blade from them. But they're going to inflict a little bit of pain to get that razor blade. What my mission was to do was to see if I could get them to give up the razor blade without the CERT team coming in. And if I can't, if I feel like I can't do it, then I motion to the control tower, step back, and then they go in and they get them. But we don't want that to happen. So I'm talking to the guy, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I don't think you should commit suicide." And he's like, "Well, why don't you think this is the right time?" And so it's a good question. So I said, "You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run, don't count your money when you're sitting at the table, because there's time enough for counting when the dealing's done." And so that just made him laugh like nobody get out. And he started laughing. They opened the door. They got the razor blade with him laughing. No tasers, no tase shields. Oh, and the officers were giving me high fives. And they're like, "How did you know that was going to work?" And I was like, "I had no idea it was going to work. I'm just, me." And we talked a lot about last week about hospitalizations. One thing we didn't talk about that I want to talk a little bit about is intensive outpatient programs. And you don't hear as much about these. I think these are great. After I was discharged from U of L, from my attempt, I did an intensive outpatient program at Our Lady of Peace. A wonderful program. I was in groups. They had either a 3-hour program you could do or a 6-hour program, and I did a 3. And so you did a 2-hour group on just dealing with your problems and issues and things that were going on, and then they had an hour-long group on psychoeducation and learning how to deal with your mental illness. Because this was an intensive outpatient program, these people were people in my group. There was a police officer, there was a teacher, there was a lady who worked for the cable company. These were normal people. You would not have believed that they had recently attempted suicide. But they all had jobs, they all had kids. We were relating to a very similar set of things, and it was very helpful. So there are intensive outpatient programs also at Wellstone and Our Lady of Peace in the local area. And I would definitely strongly recommend the intensive outpatient programs at Our Lady of Peace. And many times the insurance companies would love to pay for them, because an intensive outpatient program for 2 weeks costs them less than 1 day at the hospital. So they're like, yes, please go to this program. Then another thing that I also wanted to mention was the National Association of Mental Illness. They offer support groups. Can be very helpful. They have a support group for family members. They have a support group for survivors. They have a support group for family members who've lost someone to suicide. They have family members who have people who are currently have serious mental illness. And these support groups can be very helpful as you try to find individuals who've gone through similar things. And that is by far can be one of the most therapeutic things, to talk to somebody who has been through a similar experience that you have. So I have the comments where I can read them now off my phone. If anybody has a question that they would like to ask, now is the time to do it. I will be doing a webinar next Wednesday at 9 on suicide. I haven't really decided what topic we'll cover related to suicide. If you all have any thoughts about that, feel free to let me know as we prepare for the upcoming week. I'll let you know when you know what I think? I think next week we'll actually do one of my favorite topics on this subject, getting off the mat. This is for those of us who've survived a suicide attempt, and it kind of feels like a boxer who got knocked down and you're trying to get back up off the mat. It's lots of thoughts on this issue. So we'll talk about getting off the mat next week. So I'm going to tell one more story, unless anybody has a question, then we'll be done for tonight. Feel free to share this video with anybody that you like. I will be transferring this video to YouTube by tomorrow morning, and then posting that on there, so that if you want to share this through YouTube instead of Facebook, it's completely okay. This is also that the information can go out. I'm doing these videos for my mother, who has gone through a lot of different stuff. And one of those things is how 2 children commit suicide. And Mother's Day is coming up. Every year, my mom and I walk in the Out of Darkness walk to raise money for suicide intervention. I posted the link to that associated with this video. So if you found this video helpful, if you could please click on that link and donate, I would sure appreciate it. So now to go to my geeky story. So one of the main interest areas I have is Harry Potter, and he's just cool. I mean, not as cool as Hermione. Hermione was actually kind of cooler than Harry, but we'll get to that later. And there's these creatures that they talk about in the book, and they transport some of the upperclassmen students to school on the first day, and they're called thestrals. Now, to most of the students, they can't see the thestrals. And actually, only people who have seen death or tragedy can see the thestrals. And I feel like many of us who listen to this video, many of the people that you would see at the Outer Darkness Walk, they can see the thestrals. Suicide is all too common of an occurrence. I was talking about this with my cousin Brian earlier today, that if you asked anybody in this world, do you have any experience with yourself or someone you know with suicide, and they would have a story. It'd either be them, it'd be a friend, it'd be a family member, somebody that they knew, that a classmate that attempted, a family member that passed away. This is something unfortunately that many of us can see the thestrals together. So that's why I believe in doing everything we can to eliminate it. So I hope you all have a good evening. Feel free to message me with any questions that you have throughout the week, and I will see you next Wednesday at 9 p.m.